Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the AuthorU Guide to Book Publishing podcast. I'm Dr. Judith Briles, and as always, we try to give you ahas, tips, tidbits, strategies that will help you in your overall author quest, author success, and the publishing journey. I always like to start with a little quote from my book, How to Create Snappy, Sassy, Salty Success for Authors and Writers. And this is going to fit in for today. Sometimes a great sentence contains just a single. And I'm going to add on sometimes a great article, a great blog has a paragraph that is only a single sentence, and also your book. So with that, we're going to be talking about how to write hot. And in Writing Hot, we have the awesome Ann Randolph. I always think of her as a writing muse. With that, Ann is also an author of fiction and nonfiction. She's worked with authors, she's going to tell me how many gazillions of years, but for a long time. She does what we call kitchen table writing, where she brings people into her home, sometimes other places, but into her home to work on really taking your imagination, your creativity to get the sparks going, and get your writing in play. And you can find her at her website. She has a couple of them, but I'll just give you Ann Randolph, ANNERANDOLPH, to get us going. And as always, we always like to thank some of our sponsors, certainly AuthorU.org, which is a membership organization for authors who truly want to be seriously successful. And of course, my company, the Book Shepherd, .com. And then there is two awesome designers, book designers. One is Rebecca Finkel, who has been a guest on the show many, many times with swag ideas, book cover ideas, what's trending and going on. And you can find her at fpgd.com. And then there's Nick Selinger of nzgraphics.com. And Nick is, when I have young people I'm working with, I always like to bring Nick into the loop. Maybe it's that musician side in him that really brings out some different tweaks and twists, but excellent support. And we highly, highly recommend them from the TogiNet show, where I base my show on, and we're all over the place, but that's where the AuthorU-Your Guide to Book Publishing, it's been part of, both of those individuals have been part of my author success and winning almost 60 book awards now for their cover designs and interior designs. And with that said, we are going to jump to Ms. Ann and welcome her to the show. And Ann, I have to ask you, what let you know that you're going to be a wordsmith, a writing coach? Where did that come into play?
It just happened. It also happened
Oh.
20 years ago. I was believing in writing, and a couple of people said they wanted to write, and I said, okay, come to my house. And from there is the story. I love being described as awesome. I'll have to put that in my notes. That's terrific.
Awesomeness, awesome squared. So we have those things. All right, so you've been doing this for 2 decades plus, right?
Easily for 2 decades, right? And it is funny that it just happened. A couple of people said, I want to write, and I went, okay. And from there, it's built itself into a book and a variety of writing people. I do a regular writing class every week on Thursday mornings from 10 to 12 Mountain Time. So if anybody's interested in joining for that, shoot me an email at annrandolph@comcast.net.
Perfect. Well, I mean, it's always good to know. I mean, you're based in Colorado. Everyone, as we tape this, it is freaking cold here today. We were -3 when I woke up, but it's, and so what does one do on a cold day? Oh, stay in and write. That's a good idea. So
It's a
we have
great
that.
idea.
All right. So and did you, I was a I always thought I was just going to do nonfiction. Little did I know I was going to transition into the fiction author arena and have that hat on my head. That do you see authors, the writers that you do with are primarily fiction, or are they a mixed bag like I've
It's
become, or?
Yeah, it's very much a mixed bag. It's uh, some people are writing their life story. I also have a website called writeyourlifestory.org, and some people just come to write. And I always begin with a poem, and then we pull some lines out of the poem. Sometimes that's their start line, and then go from there. I also have a long list of start lines that have words like "can I," do I have to?" And the key for me for start lines is that they're about yearning. What are you yearning for? And yearning is worth writing down. It's a great word. Lots of things can come from that.
Mm-hmm. Yearning. So you just throw a word out and then you take it and run with it, right?
That's it exactly. I say writing is discovery, and so you want to discover what is coming out of you. It might not have anything to do with what I suggest, and that's almost better that you're writing because only you can tell the story that you have to tell.
Mm-hmm. Which is important. Totally important.
It
Right.
really is important.
Uh, and let's kind of jump into that. So you start them with the work. Let's say I'm going to a workshop that you have, and I'm going to spend a couple of hours with the writing muse. What are you going to tell me to do?
Well, it's pretty much not. I'm not doing the telling. A lot of times, I take lessons from other people. I have a wonderful bibliography of other people that have written about writing. That's also something that I can send people if they want to. One of my
Hmm.
favorite stories is about Judith Briles, who
Uh-oh,
came to one of my workshops
I did.
and and do you want to keep on with the story? It has
Well,
something to do with writing and being a prostitute.
it was publishing. I compared. Well, here's what it was. It actually, we were in a workshop and there were several other people there, and Anne had set the stage and she had a few visual props out, and she told us to pick a few of the items, and we had to write, and we had to use whatever we selected in our imagination that we saw. We had to select them and use them within the first paragraph or two. How I segued from a few items of fruit to where I landed 5 minutes later, I have no idea. I have no idea what was going on in my mind at the time. But I ended up going with, I remember there was a banana, but I ended up getting to the very end of it talking about integrity and ethics. And I said something like this, that prostitution had more integrity than publishing today. That with a prostitute, you knew what was going to happen, how much it was going to cost, and how much time it would take. And so you knew what you got for your money. And I still marvel on how I got there. I don't know how I got there.
I know how you got there. You allowed the spirit to come through you, and it just came out because it was already there. You just got out
Oh,
of the way.
oh, okay. So I must have gotten irritated with
Oh,
something.
good.
Oh, one of my, for all of you, it's been a while since I have done a podcast, which I think I need to come back to, on the publishing predators. And there could have been something triggering that I was going on that just so ticked me off, where I saw the scams in play, or some authors who had been taken severely advantage of and lied to. Maybe they had money stolen. I mean, I remember one time one guy, Ann called me, and or this guy called me Ann. I'm telling you, to Ann, that he was just moaning and groaning about this experience he had. And I said, well, just get out of it. Cancel the contract. You can cancel a contract with that company. I know you can. And I also told him they're one of the kingpins of publishing predators out there. And she, he went on and he went on, and he finally, and I see, he said, well, I signed the contract. And I said, you did what? And he says, you know what? I just wanted them to stop calling me and haranguing me and harassing me. So I just signed it. And that's where he was. So it could have been something like that that was my button pusher. So
Well, it was a great button to push, and I love every time we talk. I always bring this up because it's such a great story, and once again, you, this writer, was being present in the now, that you were letting the writing be present. And I keep using this term, you got out of the way. And guess
yeah, I
what?
did.
Some, some genius came out.
Yeah, it
Like
was
you
a
don't
click.
have genius other than that.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember Anne made me read the whole 5 minutes that I wrote to the group, just because that's what we did. So, Anne, let's segue. Um, we've used the word creative. So, do you, and being creative and getting creative like I did and got out of the way, um, is there a formula to allow for the creativity to roll through, so you can do, which I always have loved your phrase, learn how to write hot. You got to write.
I have a formula. I have a formula for sure. One is to write by hand. I really believe that because the live hand, is the closest to the heart. And that's where things come. They don't come out of the brain, they come out of the heart. And when you're writing by hand, I say let the pen move, let your fingers do the talking.
Mhm.
And and let whatever comes up on the page. I mean, it can be, this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard of doing in my life. That's fine to come out on the page. And there's some few of us who really want to use the computer, and it's okay. I still think writing by hand is best. So if you have to write by computer and you're doing fresh writing, creative writing, I say turn off the screen. So you're writing on the computer, but you're not looking at what you're writing. And I also say, or look out the window. Let the window be the place that your ideas come from, because
The
your
Let the
genius
window
is
be the
there.
muse. That's when, I'm one of those people that allow yourself to, as what we would call daydreaming almost. Um,
Exactly. Yeah.
just to let it go. And that I know what I think we all have muses. We could talk about muses. Mine are, I like to hear water flowing. That's always been kind of bigger. Have a sense that it's around me. And I've always loved sunshine. I do better in those eras, and several, and I have written drafts, entire drafts of a book in a week on a cruise ship.
I love that. That's water, that's sun,
Hmm.
and you can let yourself go once again.
Hmm. Exactly. You can just let it flow, which is what I like to do on that. So if you have that creativity, so glaring out the window, write with your hands so you're connected with your heart. Even initially, then you can maybe transition. Maybe the idea comes from right away. Sometimes it's, for me. I always carry notepads. I have them in my purse. I sometimes will put them in a pocket that I can write on very quickly when an idea comes. Do you have anything you do like that?
I I have asked my husband about that. I have writing stuff all over my house. I have pads and pens and all kinds of things. I love you talk about the word creative. And I ask the question, do you have to be creative to do creative writing? And the answer is no, no, you don't. All you have to do is show up, say what comes out of your hand. I also tell people that if nothing is coming, pick a line, any line. It could come from the poem, it could come from your head, and repeat it. Just write that short line over and over and over again, and something will start pouring out of your hand or out of your
Hmm.
computer keys.
Hmm. Even if you don't use it, I can you talk about a couple of things? I'd love to have you kiss on procrastination and blocking, but you do, and I'm not talking about writer's block then, but people who just talk about it, but they never do it. That kind of thing. And what kind do you have any tips to spark it to move along where people get hit with that?
Procrastination is great. It's so easy to do. I always say, do not get up and get that cup of coffee. Stay in the seat. And oftentimes, if you're stuck, write the line that you were, any line, and just repeat that line. So I've said that before, but I find that so important that you just let it come, let it go. And the thing is that your genius is already there. Everybody is a genius. All we have to do is get out of the way so the genius can speak.
I am reminded, when I think of keep the butt in the chair is what you're saying. You know, let the creative, don't get that. For me, it's a mug of tea or iced tea or something.
Right. Or
And
just
going
go
and
to the bathroom a lot of times.
well, sometimes that's a good idea if you really have to go. That would be a good idea.
Okay,
But
we'll let that
but
one
you,
go.
I'll let them go because sometimes when you get there, you might think of something. Because you have relief. Finally, you
That's really cool.
yeah, I
I
just
have
thought me.
something I have something that I call the rules of the road. And I say for creative writing, there are no rules. So here are the rules. Let the pen do the talking. Be present in the now. Let whatever come up hit the page. Think
Do you have you do you have tips?
tomorrow.
Okay, so thinking tomorrow, do you have tips for staying in the present that you don't get distracted? I mean, I've always said a lot of people, when they meet someone who is a writer or an author, they often don't think that this might be a job that might need their time, that they are open for any interruption at any time. Have you experienced that?
One really important thing to stay in the present is when the phone rings.
Yeah.
Just let it ring. It drives my class crazy because they'll be writing and the phone will ring and they say, "Aren't you going to get that?" And I say, "No, just let it ring." And just that awful sound of a phone ringing, something else can come up because you heard it. I also say save spelling, grammar, and punctuation for another day. That is a completely different side of the brain. So there's the creative side of the brain where things just come out and it's brilliant. And then there's that side of the brain that where you might correct the spelling or you might something might happen. I say if you're writing and you know something is just a mess, just slap it into parentheses. Another, I think, important rule, and this is about staying in the now, is to
Hmm.
read your work aloud. To read it aloud when it's in the air, you can hear things, that you never thought of. And that's what you want to write. You want to write what you would never have thought of. And once again, I have in my class, I say we can only make positive comments. We can go, there are thousands of places you can go and they tell you everything that's wrong with what you do, but
Mm-hmm.
very few places tell you what you have done well. And my theory is if you know what you have done well, you can repeat that. It's it's a takeoff point, and that helps with procrastination. Just know what I've done well and keep going. Say whatever comes to mind. Let the pen move. Let go.
Exactly. So letting your pen move, I, I like to do glide. That's one of my favorite things.
Oh,
To just, does your pencil glide or your pen glide, or what do you use to I think even knowing what kind of writing I'm looking around here because I have, I don't know where they are. I've usually pulled them out. Oh, here it is. So let me reaching. The pencil I like to use, I'm going to show it to everybody. I'm going to back up. Okay, so this little pencil is called a black wing. It's my favorite pencil. It's got a kind of a flat. You see that? Very broad, erases really easy, but it's the single best pencil I found for gliding and letting it just smoothly going across on that. I have to sharpen it a lot because I use it so much. But I'll buy a box of them at a time. But I think it's a single. Forget this number two stuff. Upgrade your style, and it will. It takes to write with this. Literally, it takes half the pressure of holding a regular pencil, and that's why it's. And when you don't have to put your energy in using your little finger tendons to hold it, you could hold it down just let it rest. You can let it rest on a finger as you just start writing and it glides. Promise you.
I love
Try
the
it.
term
You'll love that.
glide.
Yeah.
Glide is great, and I believe in that. I only write with a flare pen, not a ballpoint pen. That takes too much
Hmm.
muscle in your hand. But a
Hmm.
flare pen, and glide is the answer. So the words glide out of the pen. I also use a medium point, medium or broad point. Fine point, once again, you have to press too hard to make that work. Oh, thank you for that word glide. I would like to use that.
I don't have it trademarked in, but
Well,
again, this is yeah. Anyway, I use the Blackwing 602, and I keep a box in my office, and I often will give the pencil to authors, or this kind of like a little gift to go away with. But it's really well worth having a good writing instrument. Um, uh, makes a difference all the time.
I love that idea, and also to keep from procrastinating, you might make a commitment with yourself. You might
Mm.
say, "I'm going to write every day for 30 minutes, or for 5 minutes is even better. 5 minutes every day, and then I say." Sign a contract with yourself. And the contract could say, I, and write your name in. I, Judith Briles. Make writing my first task each day. I commit to complete this promise before I move on to another. And sign it, your name, and sign the date. And when you date, put the year. I also always say anything you write, put the date on it because your writing of today is different from what you wrote last week, and your
Always.
writing at 10 a.m. is different from what you wrote at 11 a.m.
Mm.
or
And
11 p.m.
I've always said that I resist someone telling me you have to write every day. I do write every day. I am writing lots of stuff, for a variety of different things. Writing on my own stuff, like a novel I'm currently working on, doesn't happen every day, but I am always writing. And I think one of the things is that when you do some writing, I mean, you could turn your grocery list into poetry, but that if you do some writing, you do keep those creative juices going. But I think for me, what's really important, because I'm a binge writer, once I get going, that I become myopic in what I'm doing and I can shut it out. So the phone ringing is not going to bother me, but that I think it's important for everyone to find what their style is. I love the idea. Make sure you date your writing, including the
And
year,
be
the
sure
contract
to
with
put
yourself. Yeah,
the year when
yeah,
you date the writing so
yeah,
you can
yeah.
find what it is. Another
Hmm.
thing I say, when you write by hand, I encourage the people in my class to type it immediately. When you go home, you can type it in 5 minutes, and you don't do any editing on it at the time.
Mm,
What I do, I type it. You could type it in 5-10 minutes, and then when I'm ready to edit, I make a new file. So I keep that fresh file always, and the new file I have the same name, and I
uh-huh.
put .rwt, which means rewrite. So you can go crazy with the rewrite and end up killing the piece sometimes. But if you keep the
Yes.
first writing exactly as it is, you can go back and find that genius you started out with.
Great. I want to add something else to it, that on my file, once you go into the computer, once you transfer everything into a computer, that it's really important. I know that, on a file, or if you do softly touch that, it'll come up. It was opened on, January 10th, 2012 or something. I think it's really important that you relabel every file, and and I do it with the date first. And when I'm working with my clients, when I'm writing with my clients, that it would have, whether, let's say it's Valentine's Day, so it would be 2/14/2025, for example, 220, and then I would have, if it was a chapter, with the a couple of words for the chapter, or it could be for the whole book. I've always found that I may have longer titles, because when I look at it, I know instantly where I am. I also, when I'm going back and forth with my clients, I will put JB in front of the date so they know I was the last person that had the hands on it. And then when it goes back to them, once we start working on one file that we're going to start sharing, it goes back to them. They will remove my initials and put their initials on it. So we see
Oh, that's
this
a
going
great
back and
idea.
forth. And this is a huge because for all of you, is that too often I see authors consistently screw up, and they open old files and old material because they keep too much of it. You got to find, you got to, if you're going to keep the stuff, you got to have a folder that will receive old stuff. That means you can always go back to it, because there could be some great gems in there, great gems. But when you keep mixing it up, you're going to keep rewriting over and over the same thing. And at some point, you got to move on. That's just
And
my
it's
thoughts. And
easy.
anything on that, Ann?
Well, I was going to say it's easy to confuse your files. And
Yep.
once again, I always put the date and I write it out, and every file I end with the date dot whatever the year is. So February 12th dot
Hmm.
25/25, because you
Hmm.
can go back and scan it that way. I also, since I have so many files going, I often put the word use this in the name of the file. So it has a name, and afterwards, and in
Yep.
caps, I say
Yep.
use this. And
Yep.
once again, date and year for sure.
I will use this. I literally this morning I was writing with my writing partner for our historical fiction, and I'm just saying, this is not the right file. What he sent back, and I finally said, Brian, where is the file dated 12/11 that I sent you? Because he was working on 12/9. And here,
Oh,
you know, 2 days have passed. We've already had other things going on at that time. And I said, I can take a couple of hours and try to unravel here what has been added to each of these files and merge them in to get one. But since you did this, you get to do it. Because I'm not going to give the time to do it.
really, it's really easy to get these files confused. I love to use start lines, and here are a couple that I use. One of them, the
Great.
first one I have, is by Henry Miller, and he wrote, "Write first always." So before you do anything else, I think it's important to sit down and write first before anything goes in the day, because you're still in that sleepy time mode. And that's where a genius can operate. A couple of other start lines would be, if only, she could have, at any time, I never thought, should I tell, what am I keeping as a secret? What would I never tell? And I love what would I never tell, because then you stuck telling it, which is kind of fun.
So is that to warm you up?
It is to warm you up, and it's a way to get you going, to just keep moving. I found also when I was working on nonfiction and creative writing, this fresh writing, I would write, and this time I was with the computer, but I would write on the computer, and when something came up for my nonfiction, I would flip to a second file and write on it, and then flip back. So you can always tell which mode you're in. You can also do that on
Hmm.
a hard page as well.
Mhm.
Excuse me. I have a couple of set of rules that I actually have taken. I read K.M. Whelan almost every day. It's a good resource to have. And a couple of things she said. Number one, creative writing can that you can cultivate daily can transform you and the writing process. Focus on creativity over perfection, and that's where I always say edit later. Um, Speak your thoughts out loud, and once again, that's the reading out loud. And also play around with different techniques. And perhaps you might want a flow chart or use index cards. And then attend writing conferences. So you always can get something out of a writing conference. And most of conferences now, you can take in a Zoom call, so you can stay in your house, but you can really see what's going on. And focus on one weakness. Is it dialogue? Is it pacing? Is it plot? Just work on one at a time. Don't try to take everything in a piece, but say at this time I'm going to go through for plot. Is it happening? And then once again, partner with, like you've talked about your buddy this morning, partner with a critique buddy or a group, and attend workshops. Craft your language. Writing is a process of discovery. Don't try to achieve perfection. Just show up. Just show up and let anything happen, even if it's just for 5 minutes. And
Mhm.
the other thing about it is it's so good for you. You're just letting what you want to come out. And I tell my writing class, this is much cheaper than therapy. And
Mhm.
to keep it from being therapy, in the writing class, we don't say you did this and you did that. We say the writer did this and the writer pointed this out. So we're
Mhm.
talking about the writer and the writing, and you can go to therapy somewhere else. I
You
could
can't.
charge more if it were going to be therapy.
Yeah, be cheaper than therapy for sure. I was working on a I have a series of like historical novels. These 11th century, and we're
Oh,
going to
wow.
be the process. We're just finishing book 3 right now, and the one of the things that they're going to be doing activity in this village, this hamlet they created, is that the children are going to be taught how to write and read
Oh,
because the person who envisioned creating this hamlet, who did escape and ran in book 1, um, uh, had been taught by a tutor uh, to do that, and that so they're going to do that. So how are we? Are we going to have parchment paper? We're 11th century, so we're looking around and my writing partner said, well, they would be writing on wax. Okay, so I've never written on wax, on all that, but all of a sudden I am into the Google, and I'm looking up wax tablets. I can't remember, wax writing tablets or something that would be what monks would use and the monasteries way back then. Well, we have one of our key characters is a monk, who is involved now with the village, not as a monk, but as a master gardener, so to speak. But he is going to be teaching the kiddos how to learn how to read and write. And so our first lesson, I wrote it up yesterday. I was writing, and Brian was just watching me write it. Wrote it up that they have to make a platform to look up to hold wax, warm wax, so it could then start to hard. And so I was all over the place. I learned how to do a wax tablet yesterday and putting
wow.
it together. Like, so did they have glue in the 11th century? So now I got to look up and see and there was some kind of bark thing they did, and then how they had to cut the strips and all the stuff. So we had that. I had to write out that whole scene because it was very different. But then it dawned on me after I thought we were done with this chapter, and wait a second, we have to now go back and get some backstory in because Timo, who was really Brother Lemire, and the reason why he became Timo, his real name was Timonetha, and his little sister could not say that, so she called him Timo.
I
That
love that.
that we had to go back and create when he decided to become a monk, and he couldn't read or write. How he learned how to do it because he was the master of agriculture and how you could shift things around and become more productive with your crops and he would write and he learned how to write it up so he could give it to the other brothers, so now they had a guide. And that I made up the story this morning about how all of a sudden exploded and their productivity was humongous, and then how then the abbot approaches him, Abbot Sebastus approaches him, and this all ties it back to book 1, approaches him that it would be good for all the brothers to know about Timo's gifts and how he can do all this stuff. So I got that all written up so then I could segue it into what he was doing with the kiddos. And this is how he learned. But I never knew, Anne, that we were going to be doing that. It was just talking with Brian, saying, you know, we need to, what are these kids going to write on? They're going to write. What are we going to do? Are we going to take them out in the dirt and give them a stick? What are we going to do? And so that's what we did.
I love that. And I love that. Once again, it's showing up. You're showing up. Well, what are they going to do?
Yeah.
There are lots of people who write about writing, and a couple that are wonderful. Judy Reeves has a
Mhm.
book called A Writer's Book of Days, and she'll go through the whole year and give you something to write each day. And she calls it practice about being present in the writing,
Mhm.
showing up. You might be insecure, self conscious, ungrateful, reckless, whatever is outside of, or even outside of yourself. And that's kind of what you were doing in the writing. She says just doing that writing, we claim ourselves as writers. You say, where did that come from? Well,
Mm-hmm.
it came from you. You just
Mm-hmm.
got out of the way. Another one is, I've lost my head. Uh,
So let me throw one in that I have to say to people a lot, Anne, is you need to ask yourself is what you're writing, if you're really into a book now, if if what you're writing isn't moving it forward.
oh,
Um,
good, good, good.
because it needs to, like we're in this stage as we wrap up, we know how it's going to end. We know what we're doing at the very end, but there's some elements that have to come in to get there. And so at this point, as I was telling Brian, that every chapter has to really count. And I know I just came up with the Timo chapter because it had to have it to move it forward to what they were teaching them in the school now all of a sudden. So, and of course, in the 11th century, children did not go to school.
I love moving it forward. That's really terrific. That
Yeah.
reminds me of a poem by Billy Collins. Billy Collins was the U.S. Poet Laureate 2001 and 2002. And
Hmm.
he says, I asked them to take a poem and hold it up to the light like a slide. He goes on and say, I drop a mouse into the poem and watch him probe his way out. Probe. But all they want to do is take a poem, tie it to a chair with a rope, torture out a confession, and then begin to beat it with a hose to find out what it really means. We don't care what it means. What we care about is it coming out, which I find to be really, really phenomenal.
Hmm.
You know, another terrific poet is a local woman, Carolyn Jennings. She'd be wonderful to have for one of your talks. And she starts, it's called Invocation. Put down the weight of your aloneness and ease into the conversation. And she quotes David White with that. And she goes on, but she ends by saying, write lines with words fresh and unfamiliar. Let them nibble the tips of your fingers. Allow them to guide the ink of your pen. Hold it gently. Listen with deep silence, which is really quite wonderful. You know, some other writers, Stephen King has a terrific book on writing. Julia Cameron, who wrote The Artist's Way. Annie Dillard has a whole, she is a novelist herself and then has a book called The Writing Life. Natalie Goldberg, Writing Down the Bones. And one I love, Joseph Novakovich. It's spelled like it sounds. And his book is Writing Fiction Step by Step. And when I did my first novel, I followed him. I would take the book and he would tell me what to do, and I would go do it that day. Another one is Annie Lamott in Bird by Bird. And it goes on to Stephen King on writing a memoir of the craft. So
Hmm.
there's wonderful material about writing, and the most wonderful material is in your own heart. It comes out of your own hand.
Hmm. It does. All that, and I'm a big fan. I don't read King's books. It's not my style, but I'm a huge fan of his book called On Writing. And where you're saying in one of your points is you just got to show up, people. You just got to show up. And he is, the old spinning off of Nike. You just got to do it. Just start writing, and it doesn't matter um, how elegant it is. It doesn't matter if it's perfect. It doesn't matter. The only way you're going to learn to write is to write.
I love that. I love
So
that.
that's where I come from
That's
on all that.
terrific. There's a
Just
wonderful magazine, Narrative Magazine.
mhm.
The two editors, Tom Jenks and Carol Edgarian, they are delightful, and he has several good long articles about writing. I took a class with the two of them together, which was kind of wonderful. And I also took a class with Joseph Novakovich, and Natalie Goldberg. So I may not know how to write, but I know how to go to a class about it.
Well, I think when you show up, whether it's wherever you're going to write, I don't write at a desk. Usually I get a comfortable chair. I always have my laptop close by. I've got my notepad there. I'm a sticky note person. And you talked about
Oh,
index cards. I'm a huge sticky note user, multicolors. I have my characters have different colors. My themes in a nonfiction book have different colors. If I'm interviewing someone, that goes on a different sticky note with their name. I mean, I think sometimes people don't understand the power of a portability of taking notes where you can, when these things are all flowing out and coming to you, that now they can be rearranged. We got a puzzle going on, and that and you will see a flow. And the other thing, I love it, especially for fiction, but just as well. I mean, I've written an entire book with sticky notes, laid out an
I
entire
love
book with
that.
sticky notes, chapter by chapter. I remember someone commissioned me to do a book for them, a group, and it was on money. How do you manage your money in 30 days? So each day had a square, and I knew things that a couple of things, and I always had an activity. Every day had an activity. So that activity got us, the activity sticky note was a certain color. So then I could start filling in, and then I had the topic or the theme. That was always a different sticky note. Or if I was going to give a case study, or a story, or I wanted to give another exercise for them to do, those all had elements, and I could very easily in each of those little boxes. I just had it on a big white board on it, and I did the columns and drew them and did like that, and that I could just start putting them down. And if any one of the key sticky notes, like the to-do thing, the theme, that how are we going to present it, put it together, if any one of them had a missing colored sticky note, I knew where I had to go for my fill-ins really quickly. And I was able to put that whole thing together. It was done within 30 days, the entire book.
I love that. And sticky notes you can stick on the wall, and
The
therefore you
window.
can see it. Oh, that's a great idea, too.
I
Terrific.
remember on our annual Publishing at Sea cruise we do every winter, and one of the participants came by and he was just noodling. And I said, just come sit with me out on the deck. And I had a couple of pads of sticky notes. And he started talking, and I just started writing notes. And I just started putting them up on the sliding glass door. Just put them down. And I said, so where are we going here? And he started rearranging. I said, take a picture. Take, I said, you're going to take all your sticky notes with you, but you need to take a picture of how they got arranged so you can get your brain back in sync of what you were doing, or you can alter it. You can start all over. But this is just kind of a head start. So a window, a sliding glass door, a big window in your home may be just the perfect thing that you can start putting stuff up, because you may have other stuff on your walls. And some walls won't let sticky notes stick on them. So
Oh, with
just
the
a thought.
Scotch tape. There's there's
Well,
Scotch tape that can hold them up and then take the paint off when you pull them off. But
yeah,
let the words nibble the tips of your fingers. Allow them to guide the ink of your pen. The
I
sticky
love that.
note is guiding.
Nibble, I've got to write this down. Nibble the tips of your fingers. What's the rest of
Allow
it?
them to guide the ink of your pen. That's actually in the poem from Carolyn Jennings,
I
who
heard you read
lives
it
here in
before.
Denver.
Yeah. I think that's a very, very, very cool,
Sweet
on that
breath
for
of
all of you.
morning. Morning is your time. Your pen sculpts ice. That fits today for sure.
Hmm. Hmm. So again, that's why I use my little pencil because I can very quickly find it across as I take notes during this session when Ann is sharing her words of wisdom. All right, so Ann, let's come back. We're close to wrapping up here. Let's talk back to the right hawk. How do you write hawk? Are there things we need to set up to have in place around you or not have around you? Um, could it be a location? What kind of element should I have? My mindset? Tell me what.
Well, right hot is a great term for what we may not even be doing. I use my
Mhm.
dining room table, and when it's time to eat, I will clear some of this away a little bit, but it stays on the table for sure. But have stuff around, have a sticky note pad close by. I have a sticky note pad in every place where I can sit down. I also have pens.
Mhm.
I have
Mhm.
different color pens because different colors can just tell you the thought just changed. You can organize them later, but you can line up those colors and know when you look back, you can see that there's different ideas coming on here. I say time your work, and when it's time to write, I take my watch off, but I take it off so I can look at it and say, okay, so I'm going to try to do 10 minutes here, and then I know when to start and when to stop. And once
Mhm.
again, put the time, the date, and the year on everything you do.
Well, I think it's wise to remind people to date stuff. It really is. I remember when I first entered the world of writing, I always tell people I was a reluctant author. I never intended to write. That was not
That's
my
a
thing.
great. That's the
Yeah,
title of a new book, The Reluctant Author.
the reluctant author. And it's only because Art Bookworld took some of my ideas and published them. And Nine did not give me credit. He got paid for it. So that was
There
the
you go.
epiphany that came into play that if I didn't start taking some of my own ideas, other people would too. So all of you out there, y'all have ideas. That stats show that 80% of the general population in America wants to write a book. Will you? Probably not. During COVID a few years ago, a lot of books came out, a lot of garbage came out, and that if you're gonna write, you can write for fun, just write. If you want to be someone who publishes it, then you need to go additional steps. You need to do the cleanup. You need to really figure out what the intentionality of your writing is. A lot of authors don't know that, and why are they writing and what it is and what do they want to do with this
And what do
book.
they want the reader to do, or the reader where they want to take that reader?
Exactly. It's just exactly that why Ann and I are taping this. I had just an unusual experience that I had uh, friends, colleagues, clients for years have hounded me to write a cookbook. Said I'm never going to write a cookbook. Well, I can't say it anymore because I did. And and I finally put it all together just this week, and I wrote them up because I'm one of those cooks that literally will go back and forth, and I will as I do that I will take a handful of this and that, and I never measured anything. So what I had to do was start paying attention to that, what I was doing, and then I started writing it down. When I turned it all into my editor, okay, I'm going to do this and taking pictures and that. And I had like 50 of them put together that she treated it like my nonfiction books. And she started editing like that. And you know what? I lost my voice because I'm quirky in the kitchen and that I'll open the pantry and think, what is in here and what can I do with it? Or I'll do that with the refrigerator. So what do I have in here? What can I do with it? If you come to my house and you need to borrow a cup of sugar, you're probably will not get succeed, but if you want to borrow a cup of capers, I can do that for you.
I
That
love that.
Yeah, and that she took the quirkiness in the voice out. I think it's very important to understand what your voice is in your writing. It is actually my book designer who does beautiful little cookbooks. And she said, I think you need to take this back, take this away, because it's lost something, and then bring it back in. So I think in this last minute, it's really important to understand the power of your voice, and using it in your writing. So if you use oddball words, and they're not perfect, or all of a sudden it gets a red line when you go in a computer, go back and relook at it. Did you spell it right? Or does it have a variation because of the way you say it? It needs to be. Don't be afraid of doing that and using that. I mean, I think your personality should be in play. And with that, Ann Randolph, I need to thank you for being with me today.
Delighted to be here. And you have a new book called Quirky in the Kitchen. I'm
Pork
ready
in
to see.
actually it's called Cooking with Judith. And here's
Well,
what it
there's
actually
that, but the new one
yeah,
you're going to do is Quirky in the Kitchen for sure.
oh,
And if
quirky in the
anyone has
kitchen.
any thoughts or took any notes, send them to me, send them to Judith, send them to me at Ann Randolph at Comcast.net. I'd love to hear, to see
All
anything
right.
you've done.
All right. Thank you so much. Everyone, we'll see you next week.
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome.